Hello, welcome to Journey to Justice. I'm Eiko Kusasa, and today I interviewed Abdul-Karim Khan, a professor of history at Leeward Community College outside of Honolulu, Hawaii. Over the years, I have enjoyed many conversations with Dr. Khan on Islam, the Middle East, South Asia, and especially on his people, the Pashtuns, who live in both Pakistan and Afghanistan. With the changes going on in the Middle East in spring 2011, I thought an interview with Dr. Khan on his life and Pakistan would be timely. Social justice can only occur with a meaningful understanding of a region.
Well, thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to talk about myself and the people and the politics, the society, the economy, whatever in between. I was born in Peshawar, which is a town in northwestern frontier of Pakistan. And that's a town basically would give you access down country to Pakistan and up country Afghanistan. So it's a sort of a in between, close to the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. And the people, the vast majority of the people in the northwest frontier, and Peshawar is the capital of that province, which now we call it the Khyber Paktunkhwa, a new name that we are, the federal government of Pakistan recognized and approved. So it's the capital, Peshawar is the capital of the new province, Khyber Paktunkhwa, which refers to the Pashtun population. So locally we call it Pashtun, but to other people we are also known as Pashtun, and to some of us also known as Pashtuns. We use interchangeably the two terminologies, Pashtun and Pashtun, the same people, same language. So 20 million of us live on the side of Pakistan, and there are close to about 10 to 12 million Pashtuns live in Afghanistan. So in that region, it is the largest ethnic and tribal group, Pashtuns, in the northwestern part of Pakistan and southeastern part of Afghanistan. Same culture, same language, same ethnicity, same religion, which is Islam, predominantly Sunni, but we do have the other sectarian group, the Shia. We do have some Hindus, some Sikh also among us, minority, religious minority also, we have them. And so it's a huge big group, mostly agricultural people. And a lot of us live on subsistence agriculture. That would take you from month to month, or maybe season to season, or year to year, but not more. And there are certain places where you have a river, there you have a good agriculture, especially the Indus River. When it flows inland, then it gives you better agriculture. Right. So we are much more agrarian people, much more, and those societies that are chronically agrarian, also very conservative, irrespective of your religion, irrespective of your race or region, all agricultural communities happen to be very conservative, very traditionalist. So you are looking at one of them.
Yeah. A little bit to the side, the president of Afghanistan, Karzai, he's a Pashtun.
He's a Pashtun, yes.
So that means the region goes all the way to Kabul.
Right.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. And then I guess for the audience, it was the British who drew the geopolitical
the dividing line, which you don't see it, on the ground, by the way. There is no fence. And so it's close to about 1,500 miles long border between Pakistan and Afghanistan.
But there's no marker?
No marker, no.
Oh,
it's only among us, the tribe that we know, that, okay, this family lives in Pakistan and this family lives in Afghanistan, and both are interrelated. So it's very much common on the border that you marry across the border. And so my son is married, for example, or my brother is married to, you know, a girl from across the border, so to speak, that you don't see. And so it's that type of, you know, there are checkpoints.
Right.
There are checkpoints for maybe state to state purposes, but it's free for anyone to walk across.
That's interesting.
And because Pashtun would go into a Pashtun territory. So that's why there is no difference for them, and it's a constitutional thing, the border.
Right, right,
But
right.
more than that, it's for all practical purposes, it's an open border.
Yeah.
And that also makes it very difficult. If somebody wants to infiltrate from Afghanistan to Pakistan, or Pakistan to Afghanistan, that makes it very difficult to stop them. You know, infiltration in the sense for subversive activity, or, you know, for jihad purposes, or whatever you call them, or war, fighting or violence. So it's very common for people to go across without any passport. If I go to Afghanistan, I would rather go, you know, with Pakistani passport, you know, just to be safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise, if you ask my brothers or cousins, they say, forget it. You know, they just walk. You know, they don't care.
Yeah.
And so from that side.
Yeah.
And so, you know, not too long ago, when the Soviets in 1979, they invaded Afghanistan.
Right.
Boy, it created like a huge, big refugees problem. And so within the first 5 years, you know, a huge, big mass of Afghani, mostly Pashtuns, from the border regions, they came to our province in Pakistan. Close to 5 million of them.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge, big number of people. But the good thing about the 5 million, it would have been very difficult if they spoke another language.
Oh, right.
You know, it's the same language, same culture.
Culture.
So we
Yeah.
understand, you know, the cultural, traditional things, what to do and what not to do,
Right.
you know, among us. And
Yeah.
so I think it was the largest influx of refugees from very poor areas to very poor areas, you know, coming. And there was never like, I would say never in the sense that the least amount of violence between the settled people and the refugees. You know, very, I mean, minimum.
Right.
And the reason for that was, thank God, you know, one language, one religion,
Yeah.
one culture helped
Right.
people to. And then on our side in Pakistan, we recognized the fact that these fellow Pashtuns were invaded by, you know, the
Yeah.
Soviets.
Yeah.
And that's how, you know, the whole war for 10 years, from about 1979 to 1989, you know, went on, and we lived with fellow Pashtun refugees, and they lived with us, you know,
Right.
and we're very poor people,
Right.
as I said, you know.
After the war, did they go back?
Yes, but not all of them.
Yeah, 'cause-
We still, after, I mean, like maybe 25 years later, we still have 2 million refugees who no longer live in refugee camps. They live, you know, among us,
Yeah.
mostly in villages and in tribes, and intermarried.
Yeah.
And so think about it, you know, the first wave of refugees that came across the border, so to speak, from Afghanistan, they've been there, you know, when they came in 1979, early 1980s, for about 25 years. They've been there, and now you have grown-up children,
Yeah.
with 20 years
Yeah.
old at least.
Right. Right.
You have them, and they, you know, and because we marry very early,
Yeah.
boys and girls, you know, the moment a boy or a girl reach 16, 17, 18, it's getting late for marriage. You know,
Oh.
so
Yeah.
we marry early.
Yeah.
And so they are now, you know, those refugees' children have their own children, you know, married with local,
Yeah.
you know, Pashtuns. So, which is good, you know, it
Yeah.
keeps, you know, the relations quiet and
Yeah.
better. and so less friction.
Right.
So it has worked that way.
That's good. So how did you come to political consciousness?
Well, living in that part of the world, you will have to come to political consciousness whether you like it or not. Because the region was very much politicized. You know, since I was born in 1953, you know, and in 1953 the Cold War,
Right.
you know, going very up. I remind my students I was born in the year when Stalin died, and they say, do we have a reincarnation of him or what? So, Soviet Union was becoming more, you know,
Right.
aggressive, and China had just recently become communist,
Right.
1949. So in that whole region, there were, you know, the United States and Soviet Union fighting, you know, in the Cold War. And so you had to go with one or the other.
Right.
You had to be, you know, these were two superpowers.
Yeah, right,
And
right.
as a poor state like Pakistan or Afghanistan, honestly, you did not have any choice. You know,
Yeah.
you had to be with one or the other.
Right.
And so what happened across the border in Afghanistan, the government there, a king, decided much more to go with the Soviets.
Right.
In Pakistan, who were not really democratically elected people, also dictatorship, you know, a military sort of dictator, they decided to go with the United States. You know, and so that's how we crossed Afghanistan, Pakistan, our sort of international affiliation,
Right.
so to speak, one going to the Soviets, the other going to, you know, with the United States, and it also created rift in the two countries.
But between your people who are on the two countries, did it create tension?
And then, oh yes, big tension, in the sense that the Soviets supported an irredentist type of a slogan, which we call Pashtunistan, which meant to combine all the Pashtuns, you know, together and have their own state and sovereign state, and there is a history to it. You know, there is a history to it, and some people demanded. The vast majority of people on both sides, the vast majority of the Pashtuns, so to speak, on both sides really never cared, you know, whether to have Pashtunistan or not to have Pashtunistan. What they wanted was to have, you know, good life for their children, you know, especially education, you know, for their own economic betterment, you know, so whoever could help them was, you know, most welcome. So there was the political sort of a stunt or the political agenda on both sides being played.
Right.
I mean, on the side of Afghanistan, Pakistan, but the vast majority of the people on the ground really never cared.
Right.
You know, what they cared was, as I said, you know, the place is very poor. You have more mountain than land, and you have more desert than mountain and land. And so lack of water was another problem. You know, and so that's how people were stuck in the daily reality of feeding their children and having, you know, good economic, good economy, good education, which never existed, unfortunately.
But did some like events happen to you that you started to have a political consciousness? Because if you come from an agrarian society and then now you're living in Honolulu, Hawaii, something happened to make you think something differently.
Yes.
Yeah.
In 1958, by then I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
Right? There was a big coup d'etat in Pakistan, on the Pakistan side.
Yeah.
And a military general by the name Ayub Khan, the same last name as mine, no relation though. You know,
Clarify that.
but we come from the same province,
Okay.
from the same state.
Okay.
Yeah, living not too far away, you know. And so he had, you know, a military general. He carried this coup d'etat, and he brought himself into power. So from 1958 to 1968, sort of my, you know, the life that was coming into consciousness, so to speak, going from school to school to school, you know, to college.
Right.
Not so much to college, but to high school.
Right.
So from 1958 to 1968, for perfect 10 years, we were like, we lived with him and we grew up, you know, during his regime.
Yeah.
And a regime which was, at the end of it, when we were in high school, becoming more and more known as a dictatorship. And other political leaders, jumping up and down against him to remove him. And that was 1968. That was rather the high point of political activism. So even if we lived in villages and dealing more with donkeys than with democracy, but still that democracy would get you. People would come and give you the news, this what happened, and tomorrow there would be another king, so to speak, another person ruling us, and that's what happened. So 1968, he was removed, another military officer, in fact from the same place where I'm from. We live in the village and he lived in the city, Peshawar city, from the town itself. So the next person became the president of Pakistan.
So he was a Pashtun?
Both were Pashtuns. Both were Pashtuns. One was Ayub Khan, the other was Yahya Khan. Both were Khans and Pashtuns. And these were one after another, Pashtun presidents.
Okay.
From a very poor place though.
Right.
But because they were in the military, they reached the heights, of the military power. So then from 1968, more and more Pashtun consciousness, or more and more political consciousness coming into being, in me and my friends and my brothers and, cousins and other, students in the school. So when I look back, what it was, at one time it was more ethnic Pashtun nationality that came into being and activated. Another time it would be replaced by the Islamic politics, as compared to someone whose politics were secular.
Right.
So amazingly, at that very early age of the high school age, so to speak, there were these two forces that worked on you.
Right.
The secular forces, much more nationalist and at times socialist or communist, and these religious Islamic forces that worked, or rather fought for your soul, which of the two devils would get you, or the two forces would snatch you. So it depended on, how the village was, and most of us, Muslims and very conservative, Islamic people, Muslim people. And so the Northwest Frontier province as a whole, we sided either with the nationalists, some of us, with the nationalist Pashtuns in the next election of 1970, and some of us sided with the religious political parties. And so my brother, he was more nationalist type of a person and secular. I think I was much more religious type of a person. And so I went with the religious party and he went with the national secular party. And that's how his political party is now again back in power. And our, which I left 30, 40 years back, I've never been in touch in politics, especially the religious politics, but I do watch them, what they do. And so that political party came one time in power, and really did not do much, to be honest with you. Did not do much for the people, and next time nobody voted for them. So they went down. Then the same political party, religious party, had a strong sort of affiliation, not constitutional or written affiliation, but sympathies for the Taliban, across the border.
Right.
And that's in the post, I think I'm fast forwarding, to the post-Soviet, reality in Afghanistan. So this religious political party was very much in sympathy with the Taliban, because some of the leaders, they were taught by the mullahs or the religious scholars of this political party. And so this political party also had madrasas, these religious educational institutions, and so I came out of my own, village, madrasa, although I went to a secular school, but In the evening, I would go to my local mullah
Okay.
in the mosque.
Yeah.
You know, so he would have his own group of children, teaching them and preaching to them. And much more Quran and Hadith, you know, what Islam is, you know, mostly related to your personal life.
Right. So, so would you say the Taliban is misunderstood in the West? Because they're always saying they're just a very terrible, I guess in comparison to American things, like they always said no music, women don't go to school, or is that an extreme group of this?
The
Religious.
Taliban, I would say, would not be even, I think they would be even less than 1% of the population. But when that 1% of the population, of the Pashtun population, of a sort of a 22 million people, if that 1% comes into power, in state and government power, when it, you know, takes the instruments of the state and the government,
Right.
like the military,
Right,
like the police,
right,
like the guns,
right.
you know, and use it against the majority of the people, then they can do a lot of damage.
Right.
So the Western perception of the Taliban being the very bad type of religious extremist is true to the most part of it. But it would be very extremely wrong to think of all the Pashtuns, you
Right.
know, as Taliban.
Right.
Yes, the vast majority of Talibans were Pashtuns, but not all Pashtuns were Taliban.
Right.
And unfortunately, that was the biggest mistake on the Bush administration when it invaded Afghanistan in the wake of, or as a result of, or the consequence of 9/11.
Right.
Then it believed that all Pashtuns were Taliban, and that was the wrong thing.
Right.
So
right.
they sort of Talibanized the whole Pashtun group, which was unnecessary and very unwise thing to do. And so they considered all Pashtun like the enemy. And naturally then when they did this indiscriminate type of a bombing of the
Yeah.
region, that turned almost, you know, any Pashtun who suffered
Right.
to look upon himself as the enemy of the superpower, you know,
Right.
United States.
Right.
And the tragedy was that these people, the Pashtuns,
Right.
not too long ago, you know, they drew the Soviets out of Afghanistan.
Right.
So they fought for 10 years against the Soviets, and now they, with a little bit of sort of a peace for 5 years, now they have to fight the Americans.
Right.
And I think on the Bush administration, this was, I mean, the worst policy and the greatest blunder in Afghanistan.
Because they were carpet bombing
Oh yes,
Afghanistan.
oh yes,
Yeah.
they did.
Yeah.
Carpet bombing and indiscriminate killing. And they did not understand at that time, I believe, the ethnic problems within Afghanistan. Because the
Yeah.
majority ethnic group is Pashtun,
Okay.
which the majority of Taliban were from Pashtun group.
Right.
But at the same time, as I said, not all Pashtuns were Taliban,
Right.
you know.
Right.
But the other ethnic groups, especially the Tajik and the Uzbek and the Hazara, they used that, you know, the coming of the Bush administration against their ethnic rivals, so to speak.
Right.
And so it ruined the whole relationship that could be built by the Americans with the Pashtuns.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and bring the Pashtuns who had suffered in the holy war or jihad against the Soviets, you know, and they could bring them on their side to have peace and prosperity, if that was ever, you know, the Bush administration
agenda.
the agenda.
Right.
So, they could do that. But unfortunately, not understanding the real enemy and turning everybody into an enemy, that was the greatest mistake.
Yeah.
And even till this day, you know, you see that problem going.
Right.
And I believe some people, you know, have tried on their, like, individually to rectify the previous policies, but it looks like it's too late. You know.
Yeah.
You know, and unfortunately, even the Obama administration genuinely never tried, you know, an honest and deliberate attempt making to reaching out to the Pashtun group of people, which is the majority.
Right.
You know, to reaching to the Pashtun majority of people and befriending them, working with them, although there is a big security problem, no question about that, in the Pashtun area because of the Taliban mischief, the Taliban attacks, you know, and that's how you have the whole United States forces, the American forces, the whole NATO forces, boy, close to 150,000, you know, armed men in that area, you know, and we are already in the 10th year and beyond, you know, and there does not look like any peace or any prospect of peace. And I believe the fundamental problem with that policy was to create more enemies out of very friendly people.
Yeah.
The Pashtuns.
Yeah.
And they missed the train on that completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering what people in Pakistan thought when Obama was running for president. Part of his campaign, he would always give the example like bombing Pakistan.
Right.
And I used to think, what do people in Pakistan think? I mean, this is a campaign talking about killing people.
Right.
You know?
That was, I believe, a very wrong thing on his part. I voted for him. I knew his policy of bombing Pakistan and all that. I voted for him because I thought somebody would tell him that you do not need to expand this war. You need to work closely with Pakistan where you do have sort of a right not to trust all the instruments of the state.
Right.
In Pakistan, especially the ISI, the inter-services intelligence,
Yeah.
the military intelligence in Pakistan.
Right.
You know, they have the history sort of being, you know, looked upon as suspect themselves. True, you know, to a lot of extent. But at the same time, I think it was a very wrong thing on part of the Obama administration to expand that war into Pakistan. And maybe he did not understand the demography role in it. Afghanistan population, you have it, you know, at the most 30 million people.
Okay.
Of the 30 million people, you have problem with the southeastern part of Afghanistan, the Pashtun belt,
Right.
who are not more than 12 million. But he increased the war and expanded the war into Pakistan, which is what? 170 million population.
Wow.
While you cannot deal with the 12 million population in Afghanistan, how on God's earth can you afford to have the 170 million people in Pakistan against you? Even if they cannot come and blow you up, for example, God forbid it.
Right.
I'm not suggesting that.
Right.
You know, God forbid it, but at the same time, any Pakistani across the ethnic groups, when they think of the Obama administration or United States wrong policies, and they say, God, you know, why you are bombing us? While you could easily work with the Pakistani military and the Pakistani recently, especially the democratically elected government, you know, of Benazir Bhutto, who was assassinated by these extremists, and her husband is now in, you know, the president, and her party is ruling Pakistan. They could easily work with, you know, the Pakistani elected government, which had representation from almost all ethnic groups, you know, and the Obama administration, you know, missed that opportunity. And I think it was a very wrong thing to do, to have Pakistan against, you know, the American foreign policy or agenda in that region. This is, and there is a big irony in it. This is despite the fact, think about it, that United States is the greatest donor for both countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Yeah.
If there is one single country that spends the largest amount of dollars in cash and also in kind, like US aid, training, in Afghanistan and Pakistan, that is United States.
Right.
And that I call, the greatest tragedy, that we pay so much in terms of cash and kind, and yet the policy is geared to cancel it.
Right. Right.
And defeat the same purpose.
Right.
As if, you are giving money only to infuriate people more, because of you are bombing the people.
But is some of the money military money?
Most of it, yes.
Yeah, so they're really trying
yes.
to short. It's not like they're giving social services.
When in the campaign, election campaign, I loved for the first time when I heard and listened to would be, and soon to be the Vice President, Joe Biden. And I think it was touted as the Biden doctrine, especially for Pakistan. And that's the only doctrine I think he had.
Right.
And it did not work. Or he did not have maybe the courage or the instruments to enforce that doctrine. It was wonderful in the sense, based on all the previous mistakes that the American administration had made in giving aid directly to Pakistan state, and most of it military.
Right.
So the Biden doctrine was that we would work with the people of Pakistan,
Yeah.
not with dictators, which
Right.
that had been always the case,
Right.
not with the military, which was always the case. We
Right.
would work directly with the people to change the reality in Pakistan to whatever extent we can change it.
Right. Right.
Spend more on the health of the people, spend more on the education of the people.
Right.
And the more you have educated people in Pakistan, it's a very simple thing and very real thing, very real thing, then people would see the American aid, the American help right there in front of them. That school
Right.
was built with American money. This
Right.
clinic was built with American money, where my daughter or my wife or my sister went to give birth to, safely
Right.
to a baby.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So that I could see with my own eyes. Unfortunately, it did not work. So again, it was just state to state, higher up to higher up, military to military,
Yeah.
and it did not materialize. This is amazing what you just said, $10 billion the Bush administration gave to this military dictator, Musharraf.
Right.
Nobody knows where it went. And that's unfortunately, I think the Biden doctrine was the right doctrine, but unfortunately it was never put in practice.
What do you see though for your people? Like what their needs or that would help?
Well, right now, the situation is very bad, to be honest with you. The situation is very bad in terms of the daily life, the day-to-day. More people are more pessimistic than they were ever before. And life goes on anyway.
Right, right, right.
Rich or poor, life goes on. But it goes on for a lot of people in much more misery. That is one thing. What could be done? Again, Pakistan can easily stand up on its feet. And there are two parts of it. Number one, the Pakistani people, political parties, the leadership, genuinely getting together and defeating extremism on their own, in their own country. That is number one. Without that will, without that power, without that type of a genuine desire on part of the political elites, whatever the party is,
Right.
to kill this extremism that lives among us.
Okay.
United States is just one superpower. If there were 10 superpower, they would never be able to do it. So the superpower has a huge, big limitation. Super it might be as a power, but every power has a limitation, just like the Soviet Union. It was also superpower. It had a huge, big limitation. You know, lack of democracy, lack of this, lack of that. You know, it was a military thing. So what we see in Pakistan, as well as in Afghanistan, and the two are linked, you know, in a lot of ways, even if we try our best to detach the two. But the two are linked in a lot of ways, and that makes it easy, though, for United States to work with both in the same way. But it'd be very difficult without the national political parties rising up to the plate, so to speak, and find the AFPAC solution for Afghanistan-Pakistan themselves. Militarily, I think it'd be again another failure. To defeat a political economic problem would be, again, to defeat it militarily would be a big problem, just like the Soviets did it. You know, just like the Soviets did it. And so for the United States, I think it'd be militarily impossible. So first and foremost, there is the need for the people and the political elites and the parties of Pakistan and Afghanistan to realize their duty. That's one. And then the American not to play politics, not to play games, you know, in the region, to be clean and honest. You know,
I don't know.
I know it's difficult.
We can wish,
Yes, true. To be, you know, genuinely, really interested and work with these people, the leaders, you know, and make the situation to grow from the bottom up. Which unfortunately was never the case, and even till this day, it's always from bottom, you know, top to bottom. And that's a wrong way to look at it.
Actually, that is the only hope that can come.
Right. You have to have the people on your side. And without that, and you know, it's very difficult sometimes to trust the United States, because its agenda and its politics are so, I mean, cross-conflict. You know, and sometimes self-defeating. That's very difficult to even understand, and even the Americans don't understand why we're there and what we're doing, you know, and why we're doing. And the reason is there is no one single, you know, administration and a right, you know, agenda. And so you see these, you know, cross-purpose agendas, unfortunately, and that defeats the whole situation.
Okay, would you like to end and say anything that you haven't said? I mean, do you want to share anything with the audience?
Well, what I would say, being, you know, a Pashtun and leaving aside my Pashtun identity and affiliation, or whatever you call it, I'm also a Muslim, a practicing Muslim, and a religiously, though, educated Muslim. You know, and I think I might be just one of those million people who had the honor or the time to be religiously, Islamically, religiously educated, and at the same time secularly educated. Which proves that Islam and secularism can go together. As much I love to read and recite the Quran, the holy book of Islam, at the same time I love to read Shakespeare. You know, and the two are very different. I mean, books. So there is there are millions and millions of people who would be Muslim, but at the same time very fine human beings. That you would see across religions, among Jews, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists. And that is the vast majority of the Muslims are like that, who would love peace, who would love democracy, who would love progress, who would love to have good time. You know, and so if somebody sees Islam or Muslim through their own, idiotic or their own view, narrow-minded view, that's their problem.
Right.
The vast majority of Muslim, very fine people, they might be struggling with their own reality, how to feed their children,
Yeah.
which has got nothing to do with the United States or Soviet Union or China or,
Right.
Iran or whatever. It is the local reality that we deal with, the economy on the ground,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
which you could be Hindu and suffering, you could be Jew suffering, you could be a Christian and a Muslim and yet suffering.
Yeah.
So I would appeal to common Americans to educate themselves, read something about Islam, and the best book I think is What Everyone Needs to Know About Islam. That's the title of the book by John Esposito.
Oh.
A Catholic scholar of Islam. A Catholic scholar of Islam, John Esposito. Read something from him. Islam, the Straight Path is another book. And I think that our enemy is the extremist that lives among us. The American enemy is the American ignorance about Islam.
Yeah.
Yes,
Exactly.
and the two have worked very well together. I will leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
Okay.